Bullies snap a selfie, moments before everything went wrong. A place called silence. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Riverside Academy as students hurried to their classrooms. Inside the main building, rehearsal sounds filled the air as students practiced for their upcoming cultural festival. The excitement was interrupted by water dripping from the ceiling onto the polished floor below. Principal Chen Wei looked up at the leak, frowning with concern. A water stain had formed on the ceiling tiles, droplets continuing to fall rhythmically. He immediately called the maintenance department. "Ming, we have a leak in the main hall from the glass roof section. Can you take a look?" Li Ming, the school's handyman, had worked at Riverside Academy for 3 years. A quiet man in his 40s with weathered hands and kind eyes, he arrived within minutes, his work boots squeaking on the wet floor. "I'll need to check the seals around the skylight," Ming said, setting down his equipment. "The recent storms might have loosened something." As Principal Chen stepped back, he accidentally kicked over a cleaning bucket. Soapy water spread across the floor, soaking the shoes of Lin Mei, the school's cleaning lady who had been mopping nearby. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Chen exclaimed, his face reddening. "Let me help you clean this up." Mei, a woman in her late 30s with prematurely grey hair and tired eyes, shook her head and managed a weak smile. "It's all right, Principal Chen. These things happen." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, and she quickly gathered her cleaning supplies. Ming watched the interaction, noting how Mei seemed to shrink whenever she spoke to authority figures. There was something about her that suggested she carried heavy burdens. Hours later, as afternoon sun slanted through the repaired skylight, Ming packed up his tools. The leak was fixed, and he made his way to report the completion to Principal Chen. Meanwhile, Mei was searching for her daughter. She had finished cleaning and was ready to go home, but couldn't find the girl anywhere. Her daughter, Wang Xiao, often lingered after school, helping teachers with small tasks. "Excuse me, Teacher Zhang." Mei approached a young faculty member. "Have you seen Xiao?" "I believe she's still in classroom 3B. I saw her there 20 minutes ago." Mei hurried toward the classroom, unaware that her daughter wasn't alone and certainly wasn't doing homework. In classroom 3B, 3 students had cornered Xiao against the wall. The leader was Chen Lisa, Principal Chen's daughter, a girl with entitlement and a cruel streak hidden from adults. Her companions, Zhang Rosa and Liu Nina, blocked any escape route. "Look at you," Lisa sneered. "Your mother cleans our floors and you think you can sit in the same classroom as us." Xiao, a small girl with large, frightened eyes, pressed against the wall. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her voice had been taken years ago by trauma that silenced her as surely as severed vocal cords. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue?" Rosa laughed. "Oh wait, I forgot. You can't talk at all." The 3 girls had planned this confrontation for weeks. They were tired of seeing Xiao in their classes, tired of teachers showing her kindness. Today, they would send a message. Lisa pulled out industrial-strength adhesive from her backpack. "We thought we'd help with your silence problem. Make it permanent." Terror flashed across Xiao's face as she realized their intention. She tried to run, but Rosa and Nina grabbed her arms. She struggled frantically, silent screams echoing only in her mind. "Hold her still," Lisa commanded. "This won't hurt much." A security guard passed by the window, but seeing the principal's daughter inside, assumed they were studying. He didn't notice the struggle or terror in Xiao's eyes. The girls forced Xiao to the floor, and Lisa applied adhesive to her lips and hair. "There, now you really can't talk." They dragged her to a corner where a pegboard hung on the wall. With more adhesive, they stuck her there, arms spread wide, hair matted with glue. She looked like a broken butterfly pinned to a collector's board. "Let's see how long it takes someone to find you," Lisa said, stepping back to admire their handiwork. "Your mother will be looking soon. I wonder what she'll think." The 3 girls gathered their belongings and left, laughter echoing in the hallway. They felt only satisfaction at putting someone they considered beneath them in their place. 20 minutes later, May arrived at the classroom. The door was ajar and she could see inside. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. There was a figure against the wall, but it took a moment to recognize her daughter. "Xiao!" she cried, rushing in. Her hands flew to her mouth as she took in the full extent of what had been done. Tears streamed down her face as she approached carefully. Xiao's eyes were filled with tears, but she couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but wait for rescue. The glue had hardened in her hair and clothes, cementing her to the wall. "Oh, my baby," May whispered, her voice breaking. "What have they done to you?" She tried to pull Xiao away, but the adhesive was too strong. Every attempt caused her daughter to wince. Finally, with trembling hands, May pulled out scissors from her cleaning supplies. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I have to cut your hair. It's the only way to get you free." Strand by strand, May cut away her daughter's beautiful black hair. Each snip felt like a cut to her own heart. Xiao's hair, which had once reached her waist, fell in glue-matted clumps. When finally free, Xiao collapsed into her mother's arms, both crying silently. The walk home was a blur of shame and anger. May held her daughter close, her mind racing with thoughts of revenge and justice, but she knew their reality. Principal Chen's daughter was untouchable, and accusations would likely cost May her job and Xiao her place at school. That evening, while May tended to her daughter's wounds, the three girls who had tormented Xiao were planning their next adventure. They had grown bored with usual hangouts and decided to explore the old abandoned mansion on the town's outskirts. The Blackwood estate had been empty for decades, its windows boarded and grounds overgrown. Local legends spoke of ghosts and disappearances, but to teenage girls seeking thrills, it was perfect for adventure. Lisa, Rosa, and Nina arrived at the mansion as the sun set. They brought flashlights and snacks, planning to explore and take selfies. The Gothic architecture loomed against the darkening sky, broken spires and crumbling walls, creating an atmosphere of decay. "This place gives me the creeps," Nina said, shivering as they approached the front door. "Don't be such a baby," Lisa replied, pushing open the heavy wooden door. "It's just an old house. What's the worst that could happen?" They spent the first hour exploring the ground floor, flashlights cutting through darkness as they examined dusty furniture and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them. Floorboards creaked, and occasionally they heard scurrying in the walls. "Let's go upstairs," Rosa suggested, pointing to a grand staircase curving to the second floor. As they climbed, Nina lagged behind, her unease growing. She paused at a window looking out at the overgrown garden. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure moving among the trees, but when she looked again, nothing was there. "Did you guys see that?" she called out, but her friends were already at the top. "See what?" Lisa called back, voice echoing. "I thought I saw someone outside," Nina said, hurrying to catch up. "Probably just a homeless person," Rosa said dismissively. "This place is probably full of them." They continued exploring, documenting their adventure with photos and videos. Lisa posed dramatically in each shot, her social media followers eager for her latest exploits. Entering what appeared to be a master bedroom, Nina suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" They listened intently. From somewhere in the house came footsteps, slow and deliberate. The three girls looked at each other, earlier bravado fading. "It's probably just the house settling," Lisa said, but her voice lacked usual confidence. The footsteps grew louder, clearly on the staircase. Someone was in the house, coming to the second floor. "We need to get out of here," Nina whispered, face pale with fear. They moved quickly toward the back of the room, looking for another exit. Rosa spotted a door leading to a servant's staircase, and they hurried toward it. But as they reached it, the door suddenly slammed shut. "What the hell?" Lisa said, grabbing the handle and pulling. The door wouldn't budge. Behind them, the bedroom door creaked open. They turned slowly, flashlights illuminating a figure in the doorway. It was a man, tall and lean, wearing dark clothing that absorbed light. His face was shadowed, but they could see his eyes, cold, calculating, filled with purpose. "Well, well," the man said, voice low and menacing. "What do we have here? 3 little girls playing where they shouldn't be." Nina screamed and ran toward the window, but the man was faster. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back. In the struggle, her flashlight fell and went out, plunging part of the room into darkness. "Let me go!" Nina cried, fighting against his grip. Lisa and Rosa stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. This wasn't part of their adventure plan. This was real danger. The man's grip tightened. "You 3 have been very naughty girls. I know what you did today. I know what you did to that poor child." Lisa's blood ran cold. How could this stranger know about Xiao? They had been careful, made sure no adults witnessed their actions. "I don't know what you're talking about," Lisa said, trying to sound brave despite terror. The man laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Oh, but you do. You see, I make it my business to know about bullies like you, and I ensure justice is served." He pulled something from his jacket, a hammer, its metal head gleaming in dim light. Nina's screams echoed through the empty mansion as she realized what was about to happen. "Please," Rosa whispered, backing toward the window. "We're sorry. We won't do it again." "Sorry isn't enough," the man said. "Some actions have consequences that can't be undone." What happened next was swift and brutal. The man's movements were precise, practiced, as if he had done this before. Nina was first to fall, screams cut short by the hammer's blow. Rosa tried to run, but the man caught her at the window. Lisa, the leader, the one who had initiated the cruelty against Xiao, was last. She backed against the wall, earlier arrogance replaced by pure terror. "Please," she begged, "I'm the principal's daughter. People will look for me. You'll never get away with this." The man paused, considering her words. "Perhaps you're right, but some things are worth the risk." The hammer fell one final time, and the mansion fell silent. Outside, storm clouds gathered and rain began to fall. The man looked out at the approaching weather, then set about his work. He had preparations to make, evidence to dispose of, and a message to send. The next morning, Principal Chen Wei arrived at his office to find missed calls. His daughter hadn't come home, and his wife was frantic. He tried calling Lisa's phone, but it went to voicemail. "She's probably staying at a friend's house," he told his wife. "You know how teenagers are." But as hours passed and Lisa still didn't return, Chen began to worry. He contacted Rosa and Nina's parents, only to discover they were missing too. The 3 girls had been together when they left school, but no one had seen them since. Chen called the police, and Detective Wang Feng was assigned to the case. Wang was a seasoned investigator in his 50s, with a reputation for thoroughness. He knew time was essential in missing persons cases. The investigation began immediately. Wang and his team searched the girls' usual haunts, the mall, park, friends' houses. They interviewed classmates and teachers, looking for any clue about where the girls might have gone. A teacher finally provided the breakthrough. She mentioned the girls had been talking about exploring the old Blackwood estate, and Lisa had been bragging about taking epic photos there. Wang and his team arrived at the mansion as the sun set. The building loomed against the darkening sky, broken windows and crumbling facade creating an ominous appearance. They approached cautiously, flashlights cutting through gloom. The front door was slightly ajar, and Wang could see disturbed dust on the threshold. Someone had definitely been here recently. He signaled to his team, and they entered with weapons drawn. The search was methodical and thorough. They combed through each ground floor room, looking for signs of the missing girls. On the second floor, they found the first evidence. In the master bedroom, Wang's flashlight illuminated something that made his blood run cold. On the floor, barely visible among dust and debris, was a small paper crane made from notebook paper, folded with careful precision. "Bag this," Wang told an officer, pointing to the crane, "and search every inch of this room." They found traces of blood on floorboards, but no bodies. Whatever had happened here, the perpetrator had been careful to clean up. The only other evidence was a few hair strands caught on a window frame splinter. As they prepared to leave, Wang noticed something odd. In the garden behind the house, the ground showed signs of recent digging. Several areas of earth had been disturbed, and vegetation in those spots looked different. "Get the cadaver dogs out here," Wang ordered, "and call forensics. We need to excavate this entire area." The next morning, news of the missing girls spread throughout town. Parents kept children home from school, afraid that whatever had happened to Lisa, Rosa, and Nina might happen to their own daughters. At Riverside Academy, the atmosphere was tense and fearful. Principal Chen tried to maintain normalcy, but clearly struggled with his daughter's disappearance. Teachers whispered in corridors, and students huddled in small groups, sharing theories and fears. May continued her cleaning duties, but her mind was elsewhere. She had heard about the missing girls, and while she felt no sympathy for Lisa after what she had done to Xiao, she couldn't help thinking about the other two girls. They had been followers, not leaders, and now they were gone. Xiao attended classes, but was even more withdrawn than usual. Her newly short hair made her stand out, and she could feel classmates' stares. Some whispered about what had happened, though the official story was that she had gotten gum in her hair. Detective Wang continued his investigation, interviewing students and staff. He was particularly interested in talking to Xiao, since she had been one of the last to interact with the missing girls. But when he arrived to conduct the interview, he encountered an unexpected obstacle. Xiao sat in the interview room, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the table. Wang had been told she was mute, but he had dealt with traumatized children before, and knew patience and the right approach could sometimes break through barriers. "Hello, Xiao," Wang said gently, sitting across from her. "I'm Detective Wang. I'm here to talk about what happened yesterday at school." Xiao looked up briefly, then returned her gaze to the table. Wang could see fear in her eyes, the way she seemed to shrink when faced with authority. "I know you can't speak," Wang continued, "but I was hoping you could write down what you remember. Did you see Lisa, Rosa, and Nina after school?" He slid paper and a pen across the table. Xiao stared at them for a long moment, then slowly reached for the pen. Just as she was about to write, the door burst open and May rushed in. "What are you doing to my daughter?" May demanded, her voice sharper than Wang had ever heard it. "I'm conducting an interview," Wang replied calmly. "Your daughter may have information about the missing girls." "She doesn't know anything," May said firmly, moving to stand behind Xiao's chair. "She came home right after school yesterday. She was with me all evening." Wang studied May's face, noting the tension in her jaw and the way her hands gripped her daughter's chair. "I still need to hear from Xiao herself, or rather, see what she has to write." But Xiao had already put down the pen. She looked up at her mother with an expression that seemed to understand the need for silence. Wang realized he wasn't going to get information from either of them, at least not today. "If you remember anything," Wang said, standing up, "please call me." He left his card on the table and walked out. Meanwhile, at the mansion, the forensics team was making disturbing discoveries. The cadaver dogs had indicated several locations in the garden, and when they began excavating, they found the remains of the 3 missing girls. The bodies showed signs of blunt force trauma, and preliminary examination suggested they had been killed with a hammer or similar tool. The paper crane found at the scene was sent to the lab for analysis. The paper was identified as coming from a common school notebook, and the folding technique was precise and deliberate. It seemed to be a signature left by the killer as a calling card. As the investigation continued, Wang began developing a profile of the perpetrator. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity. The killer had known about the girls' plans, had waited for them at the mansion, and had come prepared with a weapon. This was premeditated murder, carried out by someone with a specific grudge against the victims. The question was, who had reason to want these three girls dead? Wang began looking into the girls' backgrounds, searching for anyone who might have had motive for murder. He interviewed classmates, teachers, and families. Gradually, a pattern emerged. All three girls had been bullies. They had a history of tormenting other students, particularly those from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. Lisa, as the principal's daughter, had felt entitled to treat others poorly, and Rosa and Nina had followed her lead. Wang was particularly interested in their most recent victim, Xiao. The timing was too coincidental to ignore. The girls had bullied Xiao on the same day they disappeared. Someone had taken revenge for what they had done to her. But who? Xiao herself was clearly not capable of overpowering three healthy teenagers. Her mother, Mei, was small and appeared frail. Neither seemed like viable suspects. Wang expanded his investigation to include other school staff and parents. He was looking for someone with both motive and means to commit such a brutal crime. It was then that he learned about Li Ming, the school handyman. Ming was a quiet man who kept to himself, but Wang discovered he had a history of violence. Years ago, he had been involved in an incident that resulted in the death of a child, his own daughter. The official report stated that the girl had died in an accident, falling through a glass roof at a construction site. But Wang had learned to read between the lines of official reports, and he sensed there was more to the story. He decided to pay Ming a visit. Ming lived in a small apartment building on the town's outskirts, in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The building was old and poorly maintained, with peeling paint and broken windows. Wang climbed the narrow staircase to the third floor, where Ming's apartment was located. He knocked on the door, and after a moment, it opened to reveal Ming's weathered face. The handyman looked surprised to see a police detective at his door. "Mr. Li," Wang said, showing his badge, "I'm Detective Wang. I'd like to ask you a few questions about the missing students from Riverside Academy." Ming's expression didn't change, but Wang noticed his grip on the door handle tightened slightly. "I already told your officers everything I know. I haven't seen those girls since they left school." "I'm sure you have," Wang replied, "but I'd like to go over a few details with you. May I come in?" Ming hesitated, then stepped aside to let Wang enter. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, with bare minimum necessities. What struck Wang immediately was how clean and organized everything was, almost obsessively so. "You keep a very tidy home," Wang observed, looking around the room. "I like things to be in their place," Ming replied. "It helps me think clearly." Wang walked over to a small table where several tools were arranged in perfect order. Among them was a hammer, its metal head gleaming as if recently cleaned. "That's a nice hammer," Wang said casually. "Do you use it for your work at the school?" "Sometimes," Ming said, his voice carefully neutral. "It's a versatile tool." Wang continued his inspection, noting the absence of personal items or photographs. There was nothing to indicate Ming had any family or friends, no evidence of a life outside his work. "Tell me about your daughter," Wang said suddenly, turning to face Ming. The question hit Ming like a physical blow. His carefully controlled expression cracked for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath. "She's dead," Ming said quietly. "She died 3 years ago." "I know," Wang said gently. "I read the report. She fell through a glass roof at a construction site. But I have to ask, was it really an accident?" Ming's hands clenched into fists. "Of course it was an accident. Why would you even suggest otherwise?" "Because I think someone hurt your daughter," Wang said. I think someone pushed her through that glass roof, and I think you've been planning your revenge ever since." Ming was quiet for a long moment, staring at the floor. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with a mixture of pain and rage that Wang had rarely seen. "You don't understand," Ming said. "You don't know what they did to her." "Then tell me," Wang said. "Help me understand." Ming walked over to a small closet and pulled out a cardboard box. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and handwritten notes. He spread them on the table, creating a collage of evidence. "Her name was Jun," Ming said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was 8 years old, and she was the most beautiful, kind child you could imagine. She never hurt anyone, never said a mean word to anyone." Wang looked at photographs of a young girl with pigtails and a bright smile. She looked nothing like the crime scene photos he had seen, but he could see the resemblance to her father in her eyes. "What happened to her?" Wang asked. "She was bullied," Ming said, his voice growing stronger. "There was a group of older children at her school who tormented her every day. They called her names, destroyed her belongings, and made her life miserable." Wang listened as Ming told the story of his daughter's final day. Jun had been chased by her tormentors to the construction site where they had cornered her on the roof. In their cruelty, they had forced her to walk across the glass panels, threatening to hurt her if she didn't comply. "She was so scared," Ming continued, tears streaming down his face. "She tried to do what they wanted, but the glass couldn't support her weight. She fell through, and the shards—" Ming couldn't finish the sentence. Wang had seen the autopsy report. The girl had died from multiple lacerations and internal injuries. "The police investigated," Ming said, his voice now filled with bitterness. "But the other children claimed it was an accident. They said Jun had been playing on the roof by herself and had fallen through. Their parents hired expensive lawyers, and the case was closed." Wang began to understand. Ming had lost his daughter to bullies, and when he saw Lisa, Rosa, and Nina tormenting Xiao, he had seen history repeating itself. He had decided to take action to prevent another tragedy. "So you killed them," Wang said. "It wasn't a question." Ming nodded slowly. "I followed them to the mansion. I knew they would be there. I had overheard them planning their little adventure. I waited for them, and when they arrived, I made sure they understood what they had done wrong." "And the paper crane?" "It was Jun's favorite thing to make," Ming said. "She would fold them for me whenever I had a bad day at work. I thought it was fitting to leave one for her." Wang understood now. The crane wasn't just a signature, it was a memorial, a way for Ming to honor his daughter's memory while exacting revenge. "You know I have to arrest you," Wang said. "I know," Ming replied, "but I'm not sorry for what I did. Those girls got what they deserved." As Wang placed handcuffs on Ming's wrists, the handyman looked up at him with eyes that held no regret, only satisfaction. He had avenged his daughter's death, and in his mind, justice had been served. News of Ming's arrest spread quickly through the town. Parents who had been terrified for their children's safety now felt relief that the killer had been caught. But for some, the revelation raised uncomfortable questions about the nature of justice and revenge. At Riverside Academy, Principal Chen struggled to come to terms with the fact that his daughter's killer had been working at the school for years. He had trusted Ming, had even considered him a friend. The betrayal cut deep, but it was nothing compared to the grief of losing his child. May learned about the arrest from the news, and she felt a complex mixture of emotions. She was grateful that the man who had killed 3 children was no longer free to harm others, but she couldn't help but understand his motivation. She had felt the same rage when she saw what had been done to Xiao, the same desire for revenge. That night, as she tucked her daughter into bed, May reflected on the events of the past few days. Xiao had been the victim of cruel bullying, and those who had tormented her were now dead. There was a certain poetic justice to it. even if the methods used were horrific. The case was closed, but the wounds it had opened would take much longer to heal. In the quiet of her small apartment, May held her daughter close and whispered a prayer for all the children who had suffered, both the living and the dead. The silence that had protected them for so long was finally broken, but the peace they sought still seemed far away.